Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here for One Art's August 2026 reading. It is the official monthly reading, although in fact we have three readings this August, which is interesting and a little crazy since I realize that lots of people do go on vacation. I think that still happens. I don't know personally, but I'm sure there's some folks out there that do vacations in, I was going to say the American sense, but do Americans take time off from work? I don't know. Yeah. So before we get the event underway, let me just mention the other upcoming readings, which are 3 out of 4 Sundays this month. So on August 16th, also 2 p.m. Eastern, the reading is going to be a collaborative reading with the magazine Quartet, which I love and is wonderful. And it'll be me and Jane C. Miller co-hosting. Unfortunately, Linda Blasky isn't available that weekend. Otherwise, she would also be one of the co-hosts. And the featured poets will be Sue Ellen Thompson, Melanie Wilson, Annette Cison, Cora McCain Liederbach, and Sarah Dickinson Snyder. And then at the end of the month, on Sunday, August 30th, we're going to have an event that's sort of honoring and discussing Katie Dozier's residency review. Um, and Katie, as many know, is haiku editor for One Art, although better known for her role at Rattle, I'm sure. But so yeah, so that's on the 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and Katie is going to feature along with Maro Dottle, and that'll be really fascinating to discuss Katie's memoir and verse residency review, which I can actually link to in the chat. Um, all right, so I also want to just throw a link in the chat to donations to support One Art programming. All right, let's get our event underway. So today we have the pleasure of having with us 6 featured poets: John Amen, Tina Berry, Tim Mayo, Francine Witte, C.L. Bledsoe, and Kip Knott. And first we have Francine Witte. Francine is a flash fiction writer and poet and author of the flash collection Radio Water. Her newest poetry book, Some Distant Pin of Light, has just been published by Servina Barva Press. Her work has been widely published, and she is the recipient of a Pushcart Prize. Francine lives in New York City, and you can visit her on her website, which I'll drop a link in the chat, and also on socials, and I will link to her handle as well. Francine, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me, and thank you to the other features. I look forward to hearing you, and thank you to the audience for taking time out to be with us today. All right, so I'm going to be reading some poems as opposed to flash fiction. I'm reading all poetry today. So I just want to warn you that none of what you hear might be true, because in my poems, sometimes I have children. Daughters mostly, because I know their routines, flat irons and tampons. To invent boys, I would need to ask questions, learn to talk sports. In my poems, sometimes my children appreciate me. Pretend daughter Fiona says things like, "Mom, if it weren't for you, I'd be living in an essay, for crying out loud." She's right. If I were a made-up child, I would prefer the crinoline swish of a simile, so much kinder than the hard angles of nonfiction. A pretend son wouldn't be so generous. He would say, "He's a lie. I'd tell myself to feel better about what I haven't done." I would laugh at him. Pretend mothers can do that. Then I would sit him down and tell him, "My poems aren't lies at all. They're just the truths. It didn't happen. So you've been warned. Okay. As we wrap up this summer, I love when people say the summer's over and it's August 2nd. Okay. That's like saying you're 30 years old when you're 2 years old. But okay. This is called Other Summers. We were wolves then, doing the wander ponder, our hunter hearts pulling us through the forest night. We needed to eat adventure, and so we would nose push anything lying still. We would roll it over and roll it over, and when it did move even a little, we would tear into its skin, our teeth and tongues, a hurricane of need. The only light coming from the moon and a sash of milk stars. The only sound, the whisper of a wind in our throats, slowing back down to a breath. Well, I lied a little bit already, so okay, this is actually a little flash piece. I said I was going to read poetry. I'm just going to stick it on a little flash. This is a 50-word story. I planted a cat. Just hair, of course, and bits of meow. I planted these cat seeds the way Mama planted her lonely roses. I wanted to grow a second cat so my already cat would have someone to love him. Then I planted my daddy's hairbrush, the one he left when he left. Okay. The river's wife. Each night I ask him if he still loves me. He tells me instead how he started, handfuls of rain and mountain streams, how it trickled into a muscled flow. I ask him again, and that's when he goes back to hiss and spin. I give up and head home, lonely, cutting my feet on scrags of rock and fallen twigs. Some nights I wake up, go to the kitchen, turn on the faucet full blast, water fingers lacing my own. My father warned me, said that the river is made up of tears from all the fish that never made it out to sea. He said he was a river once, a foaming, raging twist of a man who lured my mother from the banks, how she gave up girl-like to his tumble and roar, how I myself am part river, how if I listen close enough, I can hear the whoosh that is louder than the beating of my heart. Mother, father. My mother became both. After the father part left us one night, walked out into the rain, left footprints on the spring grass that died up by morning and blew away. Mother, father went to work, got a job at the Five and Dime where they let her take home leftover stuff, the stuff that wouldn't sell, chipped ceramic ashtrays, a lidless saucepan she would use to fry up cheap hamburger seasoned with too much salt. My brother didn't take it well, told mother father to put a plate for my father at the head of the table. Then he pushed his own plate away, like all of her excuses. Later, she'd try to tuck him in, but he'd ask for dad, blame her for chasing him away with her plainness and her love of routine. Mother father tried to do boy things with him, anything to fill in the father's space. Brought home toys from the father they were throwing out for newer models. Tiny soldiers he would line up and name the general after my father. Cap guns he'd load up and point at the world. The heart, a definition. It beats. It tells you who and who not to love. It tick-tocks your body, easing you further and further away from your birth. It is a valentine, cut up in velvet and filled up with chocolate. It doesn't stop until you die. It is etched on the bark of a tree. It is the acorn inside the tree you turned into. It is the queen in the country of a deck of cards. It breaks. It will break again. It is already broken. And this is a prose poem. It's called The Moon Takes the E Train. Stumbles drunk from a downtown dive, swirling himself milk into coffee down the stairs and onto the train, and then forgets his way home. Gets off instead at 40 Deuce, looks around and remembers the old style scene, hookers and porn flicks, how often in his fullness he would push some poor sucker into Mr. Nasty's peep show, watch him skulk out later, face wiped off, slither home to bridge and tunnel lighter $20. But then the whole place went carnival, wax museums and kiddie theater, life-sized Elmo and Elsa, who will pose for you, who will pose with you for a hefty tip. Um, and he's looking around at all the lights blinking into the darkened dark. And that's when a couple approaches the moon and asks to take a selfie. How much it would mean, what with the moon being the thing that made them fall in love. And the moon has heard this all before, how he's pulled the ties and planted romance, but really, he has a long, long night ahead trying to remember which subway will take him back to the sky. But instead, the moon takes a breath, looks at his reflection in the couple's eyes, nestles in between them, and smiles. Death sends me an email. But this was the year I was going to be young, walk the hell out of myself, unzip my skin suit, and Tinkerbell the globe. I really don't have time for death, I say to my computer, and send death's email to the trash. Besides, if it's important, death can always text, or better yet, call. The way my sister called that last time, though I didn't pick up the phone. No way to know it was the last chance I'd have. But see, death is that kind of asshole, lurking behind curtains and jumping out, surprise. Other times winking and winking the way he did my mother's last agony year. No way to know what's on death's fickle mind, and so I fish out the email and open it. Turns out to be a spam from a window company. Death to bad insulation in the subject line, and I just misread. I sigh and settle back. I can be young some other time, travel some other year. And then I think of Death sitting at his own computer, clearing out the backlog. I can only hope my name is in some kind of file marked, get to this later. The kind of email he'd fuss over the wording, fidget every comma, maybe show it to his wife for feedback, rewrite it a couple of hundred times before he presses send. And I have just two more. I was a teacher, a high school teacher for 20 years. I lived to talk about it. And I gave an assignment to write an updated fairy tale. And so one of my students said, but Miss Witt, what about you? Why don't you write something? So this is what I wrote. Cinderella later. Every midnight, we'd end up tromping the cobbled streets, shorty old shoes and pumpkin guts under my nails. Grab on, he would yell as if this time the spell wouldn't break. Can't we just buy a carriage, I would say. But that wasn't the point. Truth is, he'd gotten hooked on the magic, adrenaline pop of watching the footmen turn back to mice, some crazy addiction to sparkle and poof. Well, I just wanted the simple things, a reedy broom, the honesty of dust. In time, I got him to give it up, go to bed early, but that didn't stop him from sneaking out, digging my slipper out of the trash bin, tiptoeing past the fireplace, and searching the town for the girl I used to be. And my last poem, and I want to thank Mark again for inviting me, And thank for all of you for your kind attention. And this is a poem written in the voice of a man, so it doesn't throw you. It's called Instructions for My Funeral. Buy me a new suit for crying out loud. The suits in my closet reek of weakness, and my mistress's musky sweat. Tell my wife how ridiculous love became after all those years. Tell my children that I should have hired other fathers to make up for the one I wasn't. Invite my parents. Never mind that they are long buried. Write out an invitation and mail it to their graves. Most important, make sure that I am really dead. All those stories you hear about fingernail scratches and knuckle prints on coffin lids. Stick me with needles, set fire to my toes, and then, when you are very, very certain, hire a harpist, dress her up like an angel, starve her until she is translucent and wan. When the mourners arrive, seat them too close together. Give them something to complain about other than my death. Afterwards, take everyone out for coffee. Remind them that I didn't make them go to the cemetery and that as they bite into their squishy donut, a hole in the world is being filled in, and I am at the center of it. Tell the waitress the check is on me. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Francine. Thank you.
So much. That was fun.
That last poem reminds me, I had a fear that's totally rational for a while of that buried alive thing and like wanted like the
Yes.
bell that they used to have where like you could ring it in case like somehow right they had accidentally made a
Oh my
mistake.
God.
um and I was like, I don't even know why I'm worried about this because like I would definitely get cremated or some sort of green variant that maybe we'll come up with in the future that results in like a really robust forest or something.
I hear
um
you.
but yeah, I don't know. Somehow that seems very important. But wonderful range of material as I expect, because I know you write sort of in all forms. Um, and I love that comment about how summer's already over. So yeah, it's
Yes.
it's already summer's last call on on August 2nd. So if you guys wanted to do anything for summer, yeah, like I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 more days. Um, but so hopefully it's all going to make sense as far as the lineups go. I probably should have said that at the top, but I do like to be kind of meticulous about the lineups for one art readings. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it all makes sense as we put little like strings and thumbtacks together. But so there's a reason that I wanted Courtney and Francine to read back to back because I think the work and voices are kind of like a fun uh, interplay. So with that in mind, our next reader is C.L. Bledsoe. Raised on a rice and catfish farm in eastern Arkansas, C.L. Bledsoe's poetry collections include Riceland and his newest, Banana for Scale, as well as his latest novel, The Moon on My Back. He lives in Northern Virginia with his kid. Courtney, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone else for showing up. I'm gonna start. Actually, I have a newer book, but I'm gonna start with Banana for Scale. Um, this first poem is called A New Chaw, like a chaw tobacco, like a certain amount of chewing tobacco. Um, okay, a new chaw. I'm on the roof with a new chaw. You've been a bullseye your whole life. Just stand still and wait for the good word. Raise for it with the true book as instruction, a cane pole for the mud hole of humanity, a snare for the fleet-footed dream. I dropped out of high school to pick strawberries and drink. It was me, 5 brothers who all enlisted, 4 sisters who ran away as soon as they learned the Cardinals. Ma and Pa working up a real hatred in the lean-to means there's more on the way. You can hear them squeak when the cicadas shut up. Hope is just another town in Arkansas. When the roof leaked, we planted grass on it for the goats to eat. Cows grazed our corn husk pillows. I've heard there's a world where men don't itch every second, where the body isn't a slow dying wound. When winter finally came, we lay out in the yard, praying the snow would take us away with its melt. And this one is called Mud. We were dust, which is the next step toward rebirth. Missing ribs, too proud to eat another apple. All our lives we dreamed of someday being men. Sandalwood and Old Spice, a Riceland cap and cracked boots. When you're drowning in the sea, it's best to go with the waves and hope for land. At night, we rode rice stalks to fight witches in the skies. All we really wanted was their time, a stray eye to catch, someone to help. But we didn't know another way to stop the tide. On full moons, we trudged down to hell to battle the devil. This is what you do. If someone had offered to build a statue, we'd have whipped them wee all the way home and stuck it in a drawer somewhere for the next time we made shine. Paid off and quiet, the house sat high and lonesome on that white chalk hill while we waited for the dust to tell us something to fix, to sleep on the couch, to watch it die slow while we crumpled our hats in our hands and said nothing. Um, this poem has variations on a couple of lines by Kafka. Uh, it's called They Make a Noise Like Feathers. At some point, the stars stop looking at us. For them, life is a costume ball, but we attend wearing nothing but our real faces and our debt. We have our tea and naps, our struggles to be kind to the jackboots. There is infinite hope, but not for us. The stars have plans about opening a boutique that wouldn't allow them inside. They want nothing to be left of them but their names and stylized drawings of their eyes. Before they got famous, they spent their evenings looking at portraits of the backs of their own heads. We can barely afford cable. Every door, every eye on the street can belong to tomorrow for them. They say light won't make you happy, but they've never drowned in the dark. Um, and this is Bespoke Apocalypse. I'd like flowers in the sky falling to engulf traffic under the weight of their petals. Flames in the Fortune 500 buildings and those they've bought. The sky full of ashes. I like to pour them in my coffee for a little pep. The water taps keep going. We can shit in a bucket and empty it on Wall Street. Same for the politicians, the country singers. It's the poor as always pay the tab when the bar closes. The billionaires are dying in the rockets on the way to Mars. Loan me a missile and I'll pay you back ASAP. None of that running you see on TV. The zombies all voted to die in the sun. Get to know your neighbors. Plant a garden and hope for the best. We can eat squirrels, deer, the rich. No one is coming to save us. They can't even save themselves without a lobbyist and campaign donations. The thing I'll miss the most is things, but it'll finally get me off the dating apps. Um, and this is the title poem, Banana for Scale. Let's say you're tired, haven't slept well in months, sleeping pills don't work, warm milk under the pillow and reading show tunes in bed. 2 a.m. every night, a man comes to the door to ask if you've seen the light. No, your eyes were closed. The only light is inside you. Not what he wants to hear. He's never gracious in his exit, always kicks the dog statue and steals a branch from the family tree. Somebody above you has a grudge. Somebody thinks you've been getting too big for your britches. Or maybe chaos has a new pen name. The doctors say they can't help you. The witches are too depressed to pick up the phone. You're trying to make it till spring, If you can only see the sun on your patio, you might be able to forgive. And now I'm going to wrap up with a few poems from my newest book, Rescuing the Storm. So this is the title of the book is a variation on the title of this poem. It's called I've Decided to Rescue the Storm, after an apocryphal line by Matisse. You know how you see those memes with quotes by people? Well, this was one purporting to be from Matisse. I have decided to rescue the storm, the fallen branches of my life. Am swept away by my own intentions and so little else. The skies clear in morning, mud drying along the road, fire that only burns the air and doesn't warm. I'd like to find an explosion of blackbirds fleeing the scene and take it home for a nice dessert, but not everyone is comfortable with destruction. The truth of adulthood is that even our tragedies are commonplace, but the bank owns so much. All around me is middle management calling its own name, clean pants and see-through eyes. They're so pretty and have such nice things. My couch is older than my teeth. My carpet is worn floor. It's not enough to lie down in the evenings. I need to hear someone else's dreams come morning. And I'm only going to do a couple more. This is called The Yips. And there's a line by Fitzgerald, sort of, in here, sort of. Um, it takes two to make an accident, one to hold the map, the other to work the radio, someone napping in the back seat and dreaming of the World Series. I made a detour for my good intentions. It was you and me, the ants, a tree with our initials carved in at the only rest stop with clean toilets on the East Coast, sobering up at the gas station, Funyuns and beef jerky, buying scratch offs and forgetting quarters. I stole the keys, drove us back to your place. Night blindness and pedestrians. It meant so much to get it right. Inside, it was all hoarders on A&E, lingerie the mice had gotten into. You made me stand outside the door while you tried to find the couch. You don't understand. I have to get home tonight. You have no ambition beyond the flowers dying on your coffee table. Um, Yet again, I've stolen a line from somebody and built a poem out of that. But it's the title I've taken. Um, I was almost stardust myself after a line by Christina Borgen. It never ends. That's what they say. Or it ends, but it's like a movie you can start over on a fast food and extra fries kind of day. The credits roll and no one else seems worried. So much is left to chance. The trajectory of the bullet through the dark room at night, the sound of the whippoorwill calling poor Will. What did he ever do? After a while, willpower drops like a bottle of juice on the not that clean floor. I've had enough, but I get distracted so easily. Now I'm going to get ants. The lights are on, the lights are off. I had a shot at the pearly gates, but their teeth just shine too bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Excellent and awe-inspiring as always. I somehow didn't make the Kafka connection before. That really makes a lot of sense that you would take some inspiration from Kafka. I don't know. I didn't get that before, but I think it was a couple years back at this point where we had a reading that was Courtney, C.L. Bledsoe, with Anton Yakovlev and Ace Bajas, and that their work really synced up really well as well. There's, you'll see a lot tonight of sort of like I don't even know. I don't know what to call it exactly. I don't know if we want to say like magic realism and a lot of the stuff that you see in micros and flash fiction and prose poetry going back to Russell Edson. and I know that echoes a fair amount in John Eamon's work too. But yeah, so fun, and just like the wild images that get thrown together, it's just really something. So thank you, Courtney. That was excellent. And yeah, I dropped a link in the chat to Courtney's newest book, Rescuing the Storm, which I'll just throw in there once more. All right, so next up we have Kip Knott, who I should say is probably one of my favorite ekphrastic poets. I don't know, that just feels like something I should share. I feel like Kip is very good at ekphrasis. Kip is a writer, photographer, and part-time art dealer who travels the back roads of the Midwest and Appalachia in search of lost art treasures, which is like modern-day Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
His writing has appeared in Best Microfiction, which got Best Microfiction 2026 right here. The Wigleaf Top 50. His book of stories, Family Haunts, is available from Louisiana Literature Press. You can find his most recent book of poetry, which I'll link to, Rothko's Gospels. So there we go with some ekphrasis, which is available from Tiny Wren Publishing, which is Kip's wife Dana Knott's press. And Dana is a wonderful poet herself. And I highly recommend Tiny Wren, which we could talk about. You can follow Kip online on Instagram, and I'll drop a link to his handle. Kip, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the ekphrasis stuff, I owe a lot of that to Mark because he's pointed me in the direction of some artists I hadn't heard of before. Aaron Weisenfeld in particular, who I've written a lot of poems, and I'm going to read one of the poems based on some of his artwork. And Aaron's been gracious enough to let me use two of his paintings as the cover art for two of my books. And I know, Mark, you've got some of his work as your cover art too.
Yeah. Aaron was kind enough to let me use his artwork for the cover of my book, Take Care.
And his artwork is just amazing.
Stunning. Yeah.
Yeah, really great. So what I thought I'd do is I'm going to read some poems that sort of touch on themes that have been a part of my writing since I first started writing back in the mid '80s. And this first poem, when I first started writing, I didn't really know what poetry was. I didn't know what to write about. So I just wrote about what I saw. And I grew up in the coal mining region of southeastern Ohio. So that's what I tended to write a lot about in the beginning. Sort of combinations of the Ohio landscape, the environment, and the juxtaposition of the beauty of that with the smoke of the coal mines. So in this first poem, you're going to hear a lot of James Wright's voice because when I first started writing, I didn't know who Wright was. Somebody turned me on to him, and I found a real kindred spirit in Wright's stuff. So this is a short little poem. It's one of the first poems I ever had published. It's called At Dusk. The barns of Ohio are dying under the weight of smoke. Fields are littered with remains, ribs, spines, dried and weathered skins. A horse grazing on lashes of honeysuckle curling from a cow's skull turns for home. Something in the wind is hungry. I've written a lot of political poetry over the years. My parents really instilled in me the importance of political activism, political awareness. A couple of years ago, I had a book that came out, A Mob of Kangaroos, and it's all about the January 6th insurrection. But my senior year in high school, my mom and we used to protest at there was a Rockwell International plant in Columbus that was building parts for the B-1 bomber. So my mom and I would go there and protest, and we even got arrested one time because we stepped off the sidewalk onto their property. So I started writing political poetry very early, but it's sort of deep image political poetry because I was really influenced by Bly and James Wright and Gregory Orr. So it kind of comes at the politics through the imagery that I could see around me. So this is a poem I wrote in 1988. It's called Unveiling the Stealth Bomber. The sky twirls her blue dress open after rain. How bright the edges of clouds are, like light framing a loose door. Sumac darkens along the river. Turtles bloom from their shells. High overhead, a buzzard settles in a tree, like the echo of a gunshot. And as Mark said, I write a lot of ekphrastic poetry. Some of my earlier poems were ekphrastic poems, and I didn't even know what an ekphrastic poem was. I'd never even heard the term ekphrastic. I used to write a lot about Vincent van Gogh's paintings because I had read all of Van Gogh's letters to his brother, and I knew Van Gogh had been a preacher to coal miners before he really just focused on his art. And so that really appealed to me because I understood coal miners very well. Over the years, I've written on Van Gogh. I've written on Mark Rothko, Jamie Wyeth, who Mark turned me on to and published a lot of my Jamie Wyeth poems, Aaron Weisenfeld. And then I did a series of poems during the pandemic on Andrew Wyeth's Helga poem or Helga paintings that he had painted secretly for 17 years. And of course, when it was revealed that he had been with this really beautiful woman painting her nude pretty much for 17 years, people, were saying they were lovers. Helga and Wyeth both insisted they were never lovers. So I wrote a series of poems in the voice of Wyeth. The last poem in the book is Helga's voice, but all the other poems are in Wyeth's voice. This is a poem based on the painting Lovers, which Wyeth titled the painting himself. This is the painting. So he insists they're not lovers, and he calls this painting Lovers. Lovers, 1981. There is love here, yes. Beneath every brushstroke pulses a heartbeat born out of the curve of your hip, the heft of your breasts uplifted by pulled back arms, the apple firm fullness of your set lower lip, the subtle thorn of auburn lashes framing your crystalline eyes. Yes, there is love here. Though I have never touched you, save for the light pressure of my palm upon your shoulder, a gentle repositioning to catch the shifting sunlight streaming through the window of our secluded studio. I know every secret your body withholds from the world, and I love them all. But when I realize that I am beginning to love the way I see myself, reflected in the universe of your pupils, a crow, wings outstretched, hanging in a moonlit sky, I instruct you to turn your head and look away from me. Family and childhood, those are things that pop up a lot in my writing, both my prose and poetry. As Mark mentioned, my most recent book of stories is called Family Haunts, and that's all about the family dynamic and particularly the relationship between fathers and sons. So this is a poem called Bigfoot Crossing. When I was a kid, I believed wholeheartedly in Jesus and Bigfoot. I tasted Jesus in the bread I ate every Sunday, which satisfied my faith in him and my father's assurances that all my sins could be washed away as long as I never stopped believing bread was not bread, but flesh. I wanted my father to believe with me that Bigfoot was real too, not a man in a gorilla suit, but a missing link. I had the proof hanging on the wall over my bed like an icon in the form of the Bigfoot crossing sign park rangers posted on a road curling up the side of Pikes Peak. But I doubt my father ever noticed anything on the few occasions when he entered my room. Not the crucifix with the hidden holy water compartment above my dresser to remind, and not the Lincoln log cabin I had built to remind me of my dreams of living off the land like Grizzly Adams in some cloister of the Rocky Mountains. Not the G.I. Joe POW camp laid out meticulously on the floor of my closet, complete with tortured U.S. soldiers missing fingers on their kung fu grip hands. If I was lucky, my father entered my room beltless, simply to give me his pair of scuffed penny loafers to shine, so I would know before I fell asleep what it meant to walk a day in his shoes. I became a father myself sort of late in life. I was 37 years old when my son was born. He's 26 now, and it's amazing once you become a parent how your attitudes about parents completely change. So yeah, my son's 26, and he's starting to understand some of the things I had to deal with as my father aged. And this poem, it was published in One Art earlier this year. This is a prose poem called Lessons in Walking. The day my son was born, I worried whether or not I would be able to teach him how to walk. I knew I would have to hold his hands and lift him off the ground just enough, but not all the way, so that he could still feel the earth beneath his feet. I knew too that I'd have to let him fall from time to time, so he would come to know the joy of getting up on his own. I knew that there would be pain and frustration and anger at me for not always protecting or helping him. And over the decades, he has fallen, gotten up, fallen again, gotten mad, and gotten up again, all on his own. But today, after he picked me up from another in a series of nasty falls of my own, I've begun to worry whether or not I can teach my son the proper way to die. Grief is another theme that's been a big part of my writing, especially since the death of my grandfather back in 1998. My grandfather was like my second father, and losing him in my life was huge for me. My own father died this year, back in March, after being in hospice for a couple of months. So the grieving process is pretty fresh for me right now. And this is a poem, and I hope Mark doesn't get mad at me. This is sort of an early preview of a poem that's going to be coming out later in One Art. This is called The Final Elegy for My Father, Terence Eugene Knott, 1934 to 2026. I killed off some version of you in my writing so many times when you were alive. It seemed inevitable I would be the only one with you when you actually died. In all the hundreds, maybe even thousands of sentences I devoted over the years to your death, I never once allowed myself to imagine the softness of your eyelids beneath my fingertips. And then this last poem, I've been a teacher since 1991. That was sort of the last thing any of my teachers ever thought I would be. And they're all probably rolling in their graves, but I've been doing it since 1991. And so I've incorporated elements of teaching into my writing in some way for a long time. And this is a very short poem, and it's inspired by Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, and based on the Post-it note drawings of Aaron Weisenfeld, which I have one here. He did a whole series of these, their original sketches on Post-it notes, and sold them separately. And so my wife got me one for Christmas one year. But I wrote a whole series, and Mark published almost all of those on One Art. So this is the first poem in a chapbook I have called Distress Signals from Tiny Wren. And it's called Post-it Note to a Young Poet, number 1. Learn to adapt. The rain doesn't care that it soaks you. An umbrella is never a sure thing. in a poem, you can become the rain. The rain can never be you. Thank you.
That was an excellent reading, Kip. Thank you very much. Clearly, part of our agenda now is to just get as many poets as possible to use Aaron's work for their book covers.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
I think it's a good idea, and he seems very open to it, which is incredibly generous. I'm glad you read that poem about your father, which is brutal, and it feels like an important poem that's hard to write because as anyone who's been an editor and a writer, it's true. All writers kill off their parents in their poems.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like a thing. And yeah, you never really hear that other side of it. So it felt very original, actually hearing someone sort of like reckoning with like, oh, I really, did this. Um, yeah, so that was very meaningful.
Thank you.
All right, excellent work. Next up, we have Tim Mayo. Tim's poems and reviews have appeared in the American Journal of Poetry, Barrow Street Journal, Narrative Magazine, Poetry International, River Styx, Salamander, many others. His poems have received quite a few Pushcart Prize nominations. His first full-length collection of poetry, Kingdom of Possibilities, was published by Mayapple Press in 2009 and was a finalist for the 2009 May Swenson Award. May Swenson, great poet there. His second volume of poems, excuse me, Thesaurus of Separation, came out from Phoenicia Publishing in 2016. I'm going to drop some links in the chat to where you can buy copies of some of these books if you're interested. So Thesaurus of Separation was a finalist for both the 2017 Montaigne Medal and the 2017 Eric Hoffer Book Award, among other honors. And his chapbook Notes on the Mental Hospital Timekeeper was out in 2019 from Kelsey. Let's see, also an honorable mention in the 2020 Eric Hoffer Chapbook Award for that collection. His latest collection is Muscle Memories of Love and Disaster, which is an excellent title. And that was published by Bainbridge Island Press just this past March in 2026. He lives in Brattleboro, Vermont, and works at the Brattleboro Retreat, a mental institution, and he is the founding member of the Brattleboro, really, it's a mouthful, the Brattleboro Literary Festival. Tim, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for including me in this group of poets that have been just great to listen to. I am going to read from my latest collection here, which I'm holding up as well as I can to do. And the first poem I'm going to read is where in the poem is where the title comes from, and it is a poem to a close friend of mine who died, and she was dying of cancer in a nursing home while I was recovering in rehab in another nursing home from an accident. And at any rate, I did get to send it to her, which I'm not sure sometimes whether that's a good idea or not. But I was brought up in a French-speaking family, and so oddly enough, this poem ends up having two French words in it, which I'll give you the meanings of before I go on to read the poem. And the first one is soulagement, which means relief, And the second one, salut, has two meanings. First of all, it's used as a salutation, and then it also means salvation in French. Meditation on your final moment for Pat Fargnoli. For me, maybe that moment is a heightened state, slackened to a palatable point, where body and brain can balance before the end? Or is it possibly just a state of immense relief? No, it must be more, although I'd settle for that. Any old port in the storm, as they say. But for you, the poet in me wants something more out of body, where when it fans its feathers before your eyes, your jaw just drops and you're there. In some stories, that must be how it happens. An affirmation of the Holy Spirit extends its wing like the hand of God. But in the flesh and blood world, a bird before your eyes and bingo, you've suddenly bounced off the bottom of your life, ascending into the air of who knows where? Not a chance. So let us then think of the practical how, the mechanics to move you to your end without needing some bureaucratic benediction, some absolution, or a passport for your pale ghosts of regret. Maybe all you need is just a gentle saline solution of generosity, flushing the blood right out of your veins. I mean, why not? It feels right in its medically non-judgmental soulagement. The cool liquid diffusing the fever that was the passionate red of your life's discomfort. Your salut in all its meanings as you greet the penultimate experience of your life. The soul, I hate to say the word, twisted with the wishes and wants of this world. I hate to say it because nothing's immortal except the stone base of the universe. The soul, as your seeing eye dog, sensing everything you can't, wants its way to where the flesh isn't in the way. Christ, how did I get here talking like this? I'm not a believer, yet I think of you now, only you, and not myself, my own less pain-racked body aching in the dark with its muscle memories of love and disaster. I think of you reaching for this timeless moment, and I ask, why not pass these last moments of your life in that grace of letting go, that anti-struggle to faith? But I know you're waiting for some ecstatic flash of mind to happen before the big sigh you only have to exhale once lifts you to wherever you've always wanted to be. Who cares whether it's real or not? Won't that breath be worth it? I'm afraid I've chosen some pretty heavy poems to read today, but it is what it is, I guess. My daughter died about 3 years ago of cancer herself, and she suffered from breast cancer for a long time and refused to do traditional treatment like chemotherapy and the rest until towards the very, very end. And so this poem is called At the Chemo Clinic. It's been several years since I went, and I went only once to accompany my daughter. So now, as I try to dredge up the details to tell you or to tell anyone who unafflicted does not suffer, though we all do in our different ways. My memory melds the moment with my imagination, makes of it something other than it is or was. Picture yourself out for your ritual Sunday drive, and you need gas. So you pull into your local Exxon to fill up your body for a trip to an aimless place, circling around the lake of regret, asking yourself why you didn't do this before, cruising on through the neighborhood of wistfulness. What can I say? I remember the twitter of small talk in the treatment room, how it echoed like spring surprising me with its sound as armed with her pillow, book, and cell phone, my daughter picked a private spot to wait for the attendant nurse to come, attach the clear plastic hose to her chest, and start the pump so I could see how prayer poured into the hourglass of her heart. I'm going to, Mark published a couple of poems that also dealt with my daughter's death, and I'd like to read those. I rarely have ever read them out loud. And the first one is entitled just A Candle For. After the half-life of my daughter's last year, a dimness appeared, like a veiled busker sawing out sad tunes on her violin. The few pieces of silver glinting up from the dark velvet of her case made me think of moons. Remembrance mirrors the invisible of someone, so a self seems immortal, a thing which zigs beyond its now pulseless zag to exit flesh and hover, at least a part of forever. But a candle can only glimmer until snuff, it just sputters out. I didn't get to know my daughter until a little bit later in her life, in the sense that I think she was 11 when she asked her mother if she could meet me. And so this is a poem that sort of talks about that. A Father's Lament. We almost never met, but at 11 you asked. I forced a truce of sorts, conceded your fidelity. The years huddled like orphans between the now and thens, and the clock's hand scythed down the might of beings, leaving only the likely. In the end, I learned too late the unconditional of surrender. And let's see, okay, I guess, yeah, I'll have two more that I'll read. I kept talking about his broken coccyx and stuff like that. I broke my neck a few years ago, and this was before my daughter died, and this is a poem that sort of was about that. It's called Love in the Time of Accidents. When my daughter saw me, neck brace, keeping my lower lip stiff instead of the proverbial upper, I saw for the first time a fear of loss crumple the freckles on her face and open wide her hazel green eyes. It's not that I don't know loss. It was my middle name for most of my life, until finally I managed to lose it, sloughing it off like the loosened skin a snake sheds, then slithers on, oblivious of what's left behind. But how could I speak to her of that ease, how loss lifts burdens one never knew they carried? And I guess I'm going to switch poems here, but the last poem I'm going to read. My daughter was an adherent or a devotee to Siddha Yoga, which is sort of a about the best way I can describe it is a sort of a offshoot of Hinduism and a sect of, that does yoga. And so this is entitled The Mystery. It's not the Hindu gods swirling around in my head like cartoon characters showing the complexities of the human spirit. Behind each belief lies a small, unseen wish waiting to be fulfilled, squirreling away its nuts for the mother of all winters. It's only when it gets out of hand and the characters in my head suddenly break out in song and dance that I finally know it's finally the end. And everyone is happy they are one with the universe. I can see that in the consonance of their movements, the unison of their song, and I look at the ground in time to see even the ants line dancing to the same beat. They too are happy about the end, because the awful human shuffle and stomp can't crush the true body of their belief that soon they will return, freed at last from their carapace of karma and the purgatory of past lives, so they may once again continue to climb the ladder of human frailty toward perfection and the formless no-step dance, which is the universe. Thank you very much.
Terrific reading, Tim. You have such a beautiful, lulling reading voice and powerful, powerful work. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks.
Next up, we have two more readers left. So next up is Tina Berry. Tina is author of I Tell Henrietta from Aim Higher, which came out in 2024, and Beautiful Raft, as well as Mall Flower, both from Big Table Publishing. Her poems and short fiction have been in One Art, Rattle, First Daily, Swim, which I love, Gyroscope, another terrific journal, and SoFlo Pojo, South Florida Poetry Journal, as well as Best Small Fictions. And Tina has quite a few Pushcart Prize and several Best of the Net and Best Microfiction nominations. Her MFA in creative writing is from Long Island University, and she teaches at the Poetry Barn and Writers.com. Tina, thank you so much for being with us. Tina, your volume isn't working. Mysterious. Oh, yeah, it's just very quiet. Still very quiet. We need that old TV thing they had where they could put up that for like technical difficulties. And it's like, we'll be right back. And then you just see like the globe spinning. A little, still quiet though. Hmm. It's okay. Alternatively, if you have headphones, that might help with the volume. Francine has a suggestion that is a solid point, which is you could try to leave the meeting and enter back in. Sometimes that helps, unless it's strictly just like audio on your side. Luckily, we have on the ground IT assistance, so that's good. That's not always the case in these situations. In the meantime, I'll explain that I've been sharing a bunch of links from the poetry shop, and the reason for that is they are a trusted One Art partner. So there are other places to get some of the books as well, though I am sharing poetry shop links in part due to the partnership. And if people buy from them through the links that have been shared, One Art does receive a small commission, which I'm always quick to point out doesn't take anything away from authors. Okay, I think Tina's experimenting with the leaving the chat and coming back in, so fingers crossed. No, it's still not hearing you, Tina. This is strange. There is a good suggestion from Betsy Mars to check the audio input. I do think possibly headphones might be a solution. No. Oh wait, a little bit there, a little bit. It's getting. Hmm. That is a little better. Is there a microphone on there?
No, it's a laptop.
Oh, I don't know why it's echoing like that.
Because it's my computer.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Okay. Um, Tina, turn yours off.
You know what?
Hold on a
Why
second.
don't you go to John and
Oh, okay.
and then I'll see if I can work this out.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Wait, close your computer.
The ghostly echo effect is intriguing, though.
I left the meeting What the fuck is going on? Why is this happening?
Can you hear
Oh,
me?
Yeah, boy. Now we're sounding.
Okay, so you can hear me. I'm Bob. I'm Tina's husband.
Hey, Bob.
Okay,
Audio
so
sounds good on your end.
okay, so I'm gonna let's see, start video. Okay, and
Sorry
uh,
about that. It was mysterious. I don't
uh
know. Technology,
any
right?
better?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yay. Okay. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. Glad
It's
my
okay.
husband was here. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. And I apologize. Um, so moved by the poems I've been hearing and the short pieces. They're wonderful. So thank you for that. Um, my mother, who died a couple of years ago, was an artist all her life. Art in all its forms was important to her, and it was important for her to share that with us, her daughters. So this is Lily's. We hurried across 53rd Street, my hand in mother's, both of us dressed fancy for a day in the city. Sun cast a building's dark diamond on the pavement, and I thought, that's art too, and glamorous, although I didn't know the word, couldn't have told you why. Inside, a swoosh of wool skirts, men's sports jackets, one dull gray. Eyes closed, I see, still, the underbelly of a dove. A vast room at the Museum of Modern Art, on each tall wall, as if seated and birthed there, water lilies. You'd say it was the flowers crushed from Monet's days, their offering of furled hearts that moved me. More than awe, but in my navy coat and ugly galoshes, mouth wonder dumb, that's the word you would have used. When a stroke scrambles a brain, when my mother loses words, when a ghoul levels a country, I consider the soul, wonder what feeds it, what gobbles it away. I ask for a whiff of pond water, the ting of a lightly tapped triangle, some sign, any sign, to learn the lilies live inside me. Um, a poem about the last few years of my mother's life and birds. This is No Grief Like a Bird's. Mother knows nothing of fall's fickleness, only the smog of medicine, tang of tired diapers. To reach her, I pass nurses deluged in data, residents wheelchair dozing. One summer, a mourning dove smashed into my bedroom window and died. I was told the bird's mate for life, and its partner sang of heartbreak and innate awareness of loneliness. Mother defines loneliness as a husband too briefly known, her great love, or a scoundrel. She's a tsunami threatening tulips, fitful as weather. I am too. I'm young again, steering a stroller, sleepy baby inside, both of us dreaming of dinner, a dove hurtling against the pane. This spring, I lost a friend of 40 years who, in many ways, was like a mother to me. So, this is for Jane. Jane, your son calls to say you're dying. While you could still talk, I asked if you remembered the design studio where we met. More exhale than words, I remember. Drowning in that strange sea of satin and chenille, piles of plush cotton, we butted tables together, safe on our fabric-strewn raft, crafted a language we shared for 40 years. Jane, all spring I've been stuck without you in this in-between, my skin numb to the velvet of flowers. Finches flash gaudy in their pinwheel yellow coats, a color you once mixed in a minute, lemon, cadmium, the tiniest dot of Van Dyke brown. For you, nothing could be bright enough. Thank you. After is in my recent book, I tell Henrietta, it's about all mothers. After, rivers swirled black, trees pulled from their roots, tipped to the ground. Falling asleep that evening, a mouse walked on my pillow and ruffled my hair. It paused, then scuttled from one side of the bed to another, as if the bed were a ship alive with strange smells. I reached for it, felt tiny sparks of its fear, its trembling, indecision. My daughter crept into our room when she was little. She'd lift the blanket, push her body against my side. I wondered if the mouse had a mother and if the nest had washed away. Then I thought of all mothers, alert to the night, listening. I'll change gears a little bit here. Long before internet dating, people looking for love put ads in the personal section of newspapers. Because I was lonely recalls that time. Because I was lonely in 80s New York City, I placed a personal ad, promised to be prettier, more exciting than I am. Because they were lonely, I hauled a plastic bag full of letters from the newspaper's office, subwayed beside its poking points, already their girlfriend, protective of their secrets. Men auditioned in swirled script, postcards and post-its, quiet pages, translucent as shed skin. One cooked a perfect Spanish omelet. Another posed with 3 dachshunds, offered a ready-made family. A widower sent a list of everything he missed about his wife. I stopped reading at 7 pages. I dated a few. A sweet man who giggled. A divorced dad who brought his sullen teenage twins. An inmate sent a letter stamped with a prison logo like a warning tattoo. I let it sit for a week. Inside, an old black and white, me, 10 years old, scrawled at the bottom. I ran a finger along its edge, worn from handling, stared at the boy, messy-haired, gangly in his Sunday suit. How lonely he must have been to part with it. Sometimes you just have to be a little bit creative about love or lack of it. Here's 3 lovers I never had. After my husband watched me sit glassy-eyed in front of the computer, I made up a story about an old boyfriend who direct messaged me on Facebook. My last date with the man happened at a Greek diner. We ordered spanakopita, triangles large as baseball mitts, dark hearts of spinach, and the salty promise of feta. My boyfriend crunched into his silent, staring, as I savored mine. I gave up on him that night. He wanted my spanakopita, devoured it with his eyes. I might have shared, but he had never looked at me with such hunger. 2. I was well into my 30s, said I was a widow. I thought a touch of tragedy would make me mysterious. My deceased spouse had been in the film industry, a stand-in for George Clooney, and in his earlier days, Warren Beatty. A gold-framed photo of the two of us, actually me and a long-dead cousin with a great profile, sat on my bedside table. How did he die? Tragically. First a gel, then a paunch, then too much weed and mini quiche, then a swan dive into the shallow end of Goldie's pool. The movies are a cruel business, I said, wiping away a tear. The Secret Service man, 3. The Secret Service man, known only as Sven, rang twice, said, remain on the line for B. Barack. My heart cartwheeled when B murmured, that's me, T. We still laugh about the first time B escaped to my place. The disguise. No limo that day. The bodyguard drove a Subaru. B wore a wig with a gray-streaked man bun and sunglasses. I spread a tablecloth on the dining room floor, hand-fed B tiny treats, deviled quail eggs with caviar, mini carrot cakes, thumb-sized mud pies, all the things he loves. We talked and laughed and, well, this lady doesn't kiss and tell. Michelle's anguish was real. B said his betrayal clouded her eyes. We're decent people, B and me. We tried, but we just couldn't let go. That's it. So, thank you. So you get a little older, a little weirder, and hopefully a little wiser. I'm going to conclude with at 68. Thanks so much for listening. At 68, my outside maintains a certain boho roughness, frayed lace, dinged beads, mismatched features drifting. Beneath, birds of paradise, open-mouthed, greedy, orchids trembling, insects winged and bumping. I try to keep all that's inside, inside. Let what's still pulsing pulse, what's scrolling scroll. I don't wish to be young again, all that cheap ramen. But voila, if I was 20, I'd tell myself to get off that sticky toilet in the bathroom stall of that bar where I sobbed into brittle toilet paper. Why? Who even remembers? I tell me life is like a moth. It's not all sniffing camphor and gnawing wool sweaters. Sometimes you're neon, sometimes you flutter. That's it. Thank you. Thanks.
Wonderful, Tina. Thank you. And there's some very fun moments in there. You're a great reader. And I want to note that Because I Was Lonely remains one of the most read poems on OneArt. So holds up. What can I say?
Thank you.
Thank you. So finally, last and certainly not least, we have John Amen. John was the recipient of the 2021 Jack Grapes Poetry Prize and the 2024 Susan Loft. I'm not speaking correctly. Is it really laughter? Myers Fellowship. His poems have appeared in Rattle, Prairie Schooner, and Tupelo Quarterly. His sixth collection, which I actually have right here, is Dark Souvenirs, which was released in 2024 from NYQ Books, which is a terrific press. John, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Mark. Great to be here. Great to read with everybody, and thanks, Mark, for what you're doing with One Art. It's phenomenal. Um, Sometimes it's easy to get a little neurotic about what to read, you know, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to read poems from this new manuscript. So I'm right now trying to polish up these new poems, and then I thought, and I'm going to read poems that appeared in One Art at some point. So I'm going to read a few poems, and like I say, they're all new ones, and they're all from One Art. Wow, I apologize. I don't know if you're hearing the Chihuahua in the background. Hopefully not. I'm used to it, so I can read over it. Um, all right, this first poem is called Idioms. My mother loved that saying, the devil's in the details. As a kid, I somehow figured that if the devil's there, God must be there too. That would mean, as I saw it, that the holy and unholy are tucked into the invisible, playing tug of war or wrestling or high-fiving in the atoms, in the sprawling fog you find when you twist and twist that knob on a microscope, infinite white sea emerging. I asked my father about it once. I'm not sure about devils and gods, he said. That's more your mother's department. Which didn't tell me much other than highlighting the difference between my parents. My mother, who read a poem each morning, my father, who once told me that mythology annoyed him. What peninsula did they meet on? Waltzing a thin line before veering to opposite sides of the world, damping in their own private tides. I pray, but I don't know to whom. Perhaps some cauterized sense of self, a mind removed from memory and habit. I still dream a small room where my parents share a kiss and drop their weapons. My father tossing his box cutter, my mother her paring knife. They could both land a cut that didn't heal easily. I have the scars from their respective swipes, and I'm sure my own blade is a cross between the two. A prop you can dice logic with, retractable steel you can deny having used when your spouse is bleeding in the sheets. And speaking of logic, a throatful of proofs is gathering dust in a bathtub. On the other side of the house, tomes, magazines never read, tapped for the yard sale. I'm culling, clearing, fattening a dumpster that stretches in the backyard, a black hole oozing its own sensible music. My parents would be dismayed and proud. They'd hover over my shoulder, each telling me what I should keep and discard. These decades later, I still pace a line between my mother, lost in her galloping verse, and my father, muttering over a blueprint. But something, yes, something writhes in that white streak, that mist I dive and dive into, groping to find the silver dollar, the hidden gem. If a god's there, so is a devil. And now look, the three of us, splashing like tourists in an empty pool. Or maybe it's just me, in the depths, the heights, alone, thinking the universe is mine. Thank you. Um, okay. Well, actually, I'll read this piece, Birdman, that appeared recently in One Art. and it's sort of a takeoff on the 2014 film that came out, and he gobbled 3 aspirins for a backache. The sun trickling over the dais. The proud mayor unveiled the state-funded statue, council members and pedestrians politely applauding. He adjusted his mask, remained in his seat to see what would happen. Of course, nothing happened. The photographer caught him at a good angle. He looked triumphant, trustworthy. Already 10 years had passed. He was amazed by the stickies on his been there map. Thank you notes from the governor hung from his wall. Soon he'd need to renegotiate his contract. He was weary, though, his memory a cluttered basement. He usually felt irritable until around noon. He didn't know how age happened, where it came from. But still he saw himself as an immortal flapping against the night, a born-again hero, vigilante in a bright limbo, sharpening his beak, gearing up for an encore. Surely he could save the city one more time. Probably be a good movie to see again. In this new collection, there's a series of pretty surreal poems, and I really appreciate Mark's receptivity to these pieces. Some of them are take some pretty big leaps, I think, from time to time. This is one of them. It's called FMJ, which I don't even know what that means. It happened again by the Diamond Highway. A satyr wearing a Budweiser cap put a bullet through a windshield and disappeared into the sunlight. Police arrived. Dogs sniffed the tarmac. Detectives found a casing with an inscription that read FMJ. The highway was barricaded. Cars and trucks backed up to the standalone Gulf. Someone said, "We're in a loop here," and smiled a terrifying smile. Experts pulverized the acronym, concluding it was nonsensical, a cipher made of soot and slag. The day of the funeral, a million guests flooded a Zoom call, chanting until the FBI wrapped a trailer in Musgrove, kidnapped baby sobbing on the back porch. The satyr in the Budweiser cap sang Amazing Grace through a bullhorn, then turned himself in. At the trial, he waved his beautiful hooves, declaring he'd heard voices in the Forsythia, his angels ordering him to spread the holy word. An hour later, the judge lowered his gavel, a long and contagious sigh unrolling through the plazas and meadows and boardrooms. The satyr's hind legs were chained, his horns paired to a nub. A bailiff dragged him from the courtroom, mane shimmering, teeth bared for the folks back home. That night, someone posted on Slack they could see every star in the universe. Thank you. My last book, Dark Souvenirs, was dedicated to my uncle, Richard Sassoon, who was really for all said and done, really was my last surviving family member. And so a lot of the poems in that book were kind of directed to him, but I reconfigured the relationship. Like in a lot of them, he was my brother, he was my father. In a couple, I was his father. We were strangers who met. We were, there was the relationship was reimagined, and I really felt that creating those vantage points helped me get at something that I probably wouldn't have been able to get at if I had, you know, been more literal about it. Um, and as glad as I was to write that book, I was really relieved when it was done. I felt like I was really ready to move on. And then I realized, well, I guess I haven't moved on. Because there's still these poems that are coming out that tap into, you know, that relationship and his death and a lot of the things around the family. So this is a poem called After. The AC groaned in the weeds. Reporters paced the street, hoping to snatch a photo. My brother, the famous outlaw, reloading his gun, counting his cash in the backyard. Next day, my brother vanished in the ivy, leaving behind his loafers, wallet, a subway map. My mother spent the weekend crying, then gave away his suits. Detectives asked if I knew where he was. I didn't. After, my brother was different. He wore sweatpants and a baseball cap, strummed pop tunes on a ukulele, reciting statistics and famous proverbs, his way of demanding forgiveness. Waking up was my way of not giving it. Remember, though, the play unfolded on its own terms. I couldn't edit the script. I rode the scene until I buckled, trying to recall what my brother said. When I turned back to the text, I could never find the lines I was looking for. The dead are coy, stashing tax forms in a calendar, dropping handwritten notes in the flop houses of your grief. I spent months searching garages, tenement basements. I took buses to the countryside, determined to unearth some secret file. Once, in a storage unit off the interstate, I found a dry cleaning receipt, a turntable, his favorite necktie. These days, I have to read my brother's lips, yank riddles from his blistered mouth. I'm a cave raider, stealing his wet, green wishes, carting his treasure up those watery stairs. When I reach the light, I rummage in shallow pools, ink and blood in the current. His words are gone. Thank you. And I'll close with one more. I've always been really interested in how time, of course, on one hand is chronological, but experientially, time is so elastic. And throughout these poems, and I think earlier ones too, I've always been trying to get at that kind of like almost that feeling of like you could look out the window and then turn back and 5 years have passed. That kind of feeling is so interesting to me because it's kind of true. I mean, it is like that. Like you walk to the next room and suddenly it's, you know, 2026. Um, so this is called Theater of the Real. And again, great to be here. Thanks, Mark, for having me. It's dedicated to a couple that I know who are together for 50, I don't know, 50 odd years. Theater of the Real. To shrug the draft, he leapt a university ladder, shaking the rungs of math, piling numbers on his back. At a karaoke bar under an overpass, she belted the best version of In the Pines he'd ever heard. He tipped his hat, hugged a feather from the cityscape, slamming a double vodka shine at her feet. He scribbled poems, metronomic rhyme schemes, serenading her at Dust Bowl rest stops, the juke shacks along Highway 61. Fine, she said. Buy me a barbecue dinner. He ordered 5 ambrosia plates, dropped to a knee over espresso. Roses burst from the walls. Critics leapt from their stools, applauding as she stammered, "Okay, yes." She whittled her tunes after hours in a relative's gift shop. He dissected the Meyerson conjecture on a circular whiteboard. They juggled cars and newspaper subscriptions, insurance policies and wardrobes, gigs and tenure. Picnics in the Louisville grass, a photo shoot at the Taj Mahal, Scrabble and Parcheesi under the Eiffel Tower. Days passed like W-2s. Eggs for dinner? He asked. How about Barbados in January? She replied. In a balloon over Hollywood, she coughed her best Judy Garland as he yelled, "Bravo! Bravo!" She slept 18 hours straight. Christmas morning, she forgot her best friend's name. Later, she left the stove on, left her purse in a bird bath. He found her wedding ring in the freezer. She had no idea how it got there. They drove for hours to a condo on the Pacific. The sunset draped over a flowery sofa, painting the white walls orange. He woke at 2 a.m., doors and windows gaping. He staggered to the gray shore to find her, rummaging in mounds of kelp, looking for a credit card. She couldn't recall his touch. If he was the one who unzipped her dress in the hotel dark, cheering as she sang for the moon. He heard a voice whispering in the dunes. The air brimmed with fractals and pop choruses, that convulsion of stars. He turned back to her, but her impression in the sand had already been flattened by the tide. He figured it was her out there laughing in the waves, but he couldn't be sure. Thanks so much.
Wonderful, John. Thank you. Your poems and your reading style too. It's just so mesmerizing. And I almost feel like some of the poems that we've heard today should come with like a warning that's sort of like, don't try this at home, kids. And I'm like being half serious, like it only works when certain people do it, and when other people do it, it just like doesn't they don't pull it off. So it's yeah, deceptively hard to do well. This type of poetry, and like some of John's poems, just like the vibe of it, it feels like almost like you're being like let in on a conspiracy theory, and that we're like in like a dark corner of the internet. And anyway, there's no answers. It's just food for thought.
Thank
So
you.
a wonderful reading altogether. Hopefully, lots of takeaways and considerations for everyone. And now we're going to move on to the Q&A and community time section of the reading.